Welcome, everybody. Anybody here for the first time tonight? Welcome to you, welcome to you, welcome. Welcome to anybody joining us online on Zoom for the first time. Welcome back to everybody else. I like to start class by asking you a question to reflect on and then have you talk to each other in small groups for just a few minutes, just to in service of Against the Stream, this meditation group being a place to connect, not just to meditate and learn about Buddhism, but to actually build some community and connect with each other. It's a core principle of Buddhism, taking refuge in the Sangha. Sangha is the word for the community. I'm going to talk a little bit about the world and politics and tonight. So my question for you is, how you feeling about the world? And it's a big question. Are you feeling optimistic? Everything's going to be all right? Are you feeling pessimistic on kind of like there's no hope? We're all fucked. Life is suffering. The Buddha was right. Are you feeling nihilistic? Like it doesn't matter. Nothing matters. Are you inspired to action? My mom, who's on the line, was just talking about being out at a rally, a protest this week. Are you feeling inspired to engage, to protest, to do what you can, to be part of positive change? Or are you feeling not so inspired, kind of hopeless or overwhelmed? Or so in a concise, very concise way, in small groups, check in with around kind of how the current situation in America, and I tend to like to think more globally than just our fucked up political reality, but actually the reality on the planet, and what's happening in Gaza and Israel, and what's happening in Africa, and what's happening all over the planet, rather than what's happening in China, and all over, rather than it's easy to get a bit myopic about like, well, America's like this, and fair enough, here we are in America. But my question is, how are you feeling about the world? And it's interesting if you think my whole world is this current political American situation, and not really aware of the global reality that we're all living in and part of. Concise, don't just take a minute or so to say like, I feel like everything's going to be okay, or I'm pretty sure that nothing's going to be okay ever again. Be concise in your check-in. Go ahead and find small groups at home. I'll open breakout rooms. Coming back to the large group. The air conditioning's on. If you're cold, there's blankets over here in between these two shelves. If anybody needs a little bit of warmth, feel free to help yourself. And settling into a meditation posture. Arranging your body so that you're sitting up straight, upright, in a posture that's not rigid, but relaxed. Not stiff, but soft. Softening the eyes as they're gently closed. Softening the brow, the face, the shoulders, the throat, the chest, the belly. as we settle into our meditation practice, it's useful to remember your aspiration, your intention, why you are practicing meditation. Whether it's a simple personal aspiration like I would just like to suffer a little bit less, I'd like to be a little bit more at ease in my life, or it's a broader, more grand, I meditate for liberation, or altruistic, I practice for the benefit of all sentient beings. Whatever our personal aspirations are, I'm convinced that your practice and your aspiration will be realized more easily, more beneficially, if you bring an attitude of kindness, of friendliness, of self-acceptance. Inclining your heart towards friendliness towards yourself, kindness and acceptance towards this body that you live in, this heart, this mind. Unconditional friendliness, radical self-acceptance as the foundation upon which we sit, we meditate. And for the first few minutes, keep your meditation quite simple by giving your full attention to the sensations the breath creates. Mindfulness of the breath. Allowing everything else to recede as you focus your attention narrowly just on the breath. Thoughts in the background, other sounds and sensations in the background. Giving your full attention to the breath. The Buddha said, breathing in, know that you're breathing in. Breathing out, know that you're breathing out. Give yourself the full awareness of the breath. Track its changing sensations. And when something draws your attention away from the breath back into a thought or another sensation or sound, whatever it is, acknowledge, thinking, hearing, feeling, and gently, patiently return to the breath. Keep disengaging from the thoughts of future and past. Keep coming back to the present time experience of mindful breathing. Let go of the world. Come back to your breath. Disengage from the mind. Come back to the body. Over and over. If you're new to mindfulness meditation practice, stick with the breath. Keep it simple. Keep learning to disengage, to ignore your mind, to come back to the body. If you've been practicing this for some time and you know the full instructions, then begin to expand, become more inclusive. Investigate the feeling tone. Include the mind rather than ignoring it. Investigate the three characteristics of impermanence and unsatisfactoriness and impersonal nature of all the conditioned phenomena that passes through awareness. For the second half of this sitting meditation, I invite you to shift from the mindfulness practice to loving kindness. We practice mindfulness to develop wisdom and insight. We practice loving kindness to develop, to experience friendliness, kindness, positive emotional state of love. The Buddha said, wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. As we think about the world that we live in, our loved ones, our friends, our family, sending loving kindness from your heart with the simple wish, may you be at ease with the struggles that you face, with the difficulties, the pains, the disappointments, the losses. May you learn to be at ease. He said all beings in all directions, the young and old, those nearby and far away, the weak, the strong, rich and poor, the oppressed as well as the confused beings who are oppressing, with loving kindness, with a heart that radiates kindness over the entire world. May all beings be at ease. In the commentary-based loving kindness practice, we break this down into the categories of self and benefactor, neutral, difficult, the difficult being our enemies, the people that we judge, that we fear, that we resent. Also sending loving kindness to your enemies. May all beings be at ease with the reality that they experience, the joy and sorrow, gain and loss, pleasure and pain. This practice of opening our minds, opening our hearts to each other with empathy, with compassion. May you be at ease. Whoever comes to mind, whoever you can think of on this planet, of every race, every religion, ethnicity, nationality, political views, even the most ignorant and confused, included in a heart of loving kindness. thinking about the suffering on the planet with compassion, but also remember the joy, the beauty, the goodness that exists with appreciation. Loving kindness is all encompassing, all inclusive. May all beings be at ease. Those suffering, those not suffering. Those causing harm, those not causing harm. This wish for ease is not a free pass from karma. Everyone's fully responsible for their volitional actions. It's just to open your heart for your own freedom. May all beings be at ease. What we come to understand through Buddhism, through the Dharma, is that ease comes from effort, from freeing ourselves from clinging, freeing ourselves from ignorance. So it can be useful in the practice to qualify the metta, the loving kindness, with may all beings do what needs to be done. It's not a magical wish. It's not going to happen all by itself, but an encouragement. May all beings do what needs to be done to heal. To let go, to forgive, to uncover the compassionate heart, to experience ease, well-being, happiness. And for the last couple of minutes, just come back to yourself rather than the whole world, everybody else. Just come back to this internal world, your mind, your heart, your body. In one teaching, the Buddha said we could search all realms of existence, the whole planet, and never find anybody more worthy of our loving kindness than ourselves. So I remind you of your worth. I invite you to meet yourself with this, may I be at ease, may I be happy, may I be free. May I learn to be at ease with my pain, loss, fear, anger, all of the difficult emotions that cycle through this heart and mind. I learn to be at ease with the pleasure, the joy, the beauty of existence. Meeting ourselves with love, with kindness, with forgiveness and compassion, as much as we can in this moment. As a kid, before I found Buddhism, I had a core sense that there's something very wrong with this world. And some of that was my own family trauma I was experiencing. And some of it was some level of, I don't know, understanding that the world is not really a safe place and that it's filled with greed and hatred and delusion and oppression and ignorance. Before I found Buddhism, I found punk rock, and punk rock was an education in politics of the 1970s and 80s, and really good at pointing out how much ignorance and oppression and confusion was happening on this planet. And my own despondency and woundedness and craving and desire to escape, for me, led to addiction, which I know is true for a lot of people in this community. Trying to create pleasure and avoid pain. Some of it very, very personal in my life, and some of it about the situation in the world, and the feeling of powerlessness and inability to do anything about it became a sort of self-destructive search for oblivion. And I didn't have much hope for the world. I didn't have much hope for myself. My early life, probably a bit nihilistic about things. Live fast, die young attitude. And it shifted for me when I was in enough pain and that I was incarcerated at the time, and most of you know about this, but just reflecting on, I guess I'm in a sort of reflective mood of how my perspective has shifted over the years, from hopelessness to less hopelessness. And I feel like finding Buddhism, when I started meditating, and first, before even anything about the Buddha's teachings, just a meditation instruction that we did tonight, where we started with ignoring the mind and paying attention to the breath. I feel like it was the first experience that I had that I, through my own efforts, could do something about some of the internal suffering I was experiencing. because most of the internal suffering I was experiencing was in my mind, and it was about the past, and it was about the future, and it was a little bit about the present, especially while I was sitting in that jail cell. It wasn't very pleasant, detoxing, locked up. But my mind state and the emotional state was so much worse than what my body was experiencing, and just coming back to the breath. And that first intervention, that first refuge from the suffering of my mind being mindfulness meditation. And the skepticism and hopelessness and all of that went along with my early meditation experience, which, if you're fairly new, it's okay to be skeptical. But what happened for me was that I had the direct experience of this works a little bit. There's a little bit of hope here, because this is an action that I can take that cuts through the discursive, afflictive, emotional state that my mind seems to be in most of the time. And I can ignore it, and I can come back to the breath. And I can disengage, and I can feel the body breathing. And that a little bit of, the beginning of verified faith in transformative practices started with meditation, and then led to kind of interest in spiritual teachings and okay, this works a little bit. What's the Buddha have to say? And then also being in recovery and in 12-step recovery, and them saying well, you got to find a higher power, and you need a spiritual practice, and all of that, which sort of led to exploration. And my own spiritual exploration, inspired by my experience with meditation and my recovery from addiction, and my my own views and opinions about politics and the world and religion. I feel like I actually had a lot of contempt for religion when I began meditating. And I wasn't totally sure what Judaic, Christian, Islamic monotheism was about, but I was totally convinced that they were wrong. It was that sort of contempt prior to investigation for the most part. I wasn't raised in a religious household. My parents were hippies. So if anything, it was sort of like New Age. My mom earlier said, we weren't hippies, we're flower children. And but I had a core contempt, I think, for religion. And on some level, probably I threw Buddhism and Hinduism. I was most familiar with Buddhism and Hinduism, Indian-based traditions, because that's what I grew up with. My parents were into that. But also I had some resentments towards my parents, so I wasn't very, kind of like, well, they're right. I was very skeptical. But as I studied, and I'm not sure why I'm going in this direction, but I'm going, so here I go. As I read I was practicing meditation and started to read the Buddhist literature, mostly commentary-based books. And then I thought, okay, I better also see what the other religions are about. And so I did my own kind of comparative religious studies personal course, and I read the Bible, and I read most of the Quran and Old Testament and New Testament, and I read the Bhagavad Gita and some other Hindu texts, Upanishads and Vedas, and I read some of the Zen literature, and I read some of the Theravadan literature and some of the Tibetan Buddhist Mahayana, Vajrayana. I read the, I spent some years kind of looking at, okay, what's Taoism, what's Buddhism, what's the different kinds of Buddhism, what do the Christians actually believe, and the kind of monotheistic traditions of Islam and Christianity and Judaism, and so for me, I had some open-mindedness, I had some skepticism, but I had some open-mindedness to trying to figure out, and some of it was about trying to understand myself, my own experience, but also trying to understand the world and what spiritual belief systems helped me understand the world, and this world that I saw pre-Dharma recovery meditation practice, that I saw as a confused place, and a place of injustice, and a place of ignorance, and a place of oppression. I was awake to that from a very young age for all of the different reasons. I always saw this world. For whatever reasons, I never had a feeling that the world was just or supposed to be just. Maybe I had a feeling it was supposed to be, but I never had a lot of hope for it to be. I always felt like it's a world of ignorance. And authority is generally untrustworthy. And political systems are generally flawed. And so I didn't have a very, optimistic, or I think I would probably, it's probably critical, but I didn't have a very naive sense of the world ever. And maybe actually that's not good for kids. There's something good for kids to have some naive feelings of being safe and that the world's okay in some ways. But for whatever reason, I never had that, or very, very little of that. It's why drugs and alcohol, it's part of the reason why drugs and alcohol were so delicious, so attractive, so, kind of to escape that kind of relief, the only relief one of the only places I found relief. But as I came to study Buddhism and really land in the theism, just has never made sense to me. The kind of, there's a God that's controlling things, and humans have free will, but God could alleviate the suffering, but chooses not to. And I've always, and I know it's a simplistic theistic view, but I've always felt like if there's a God that could do something about this and isn't, fuck them. How dare they? If there's a God that could actually do something about the suffering on this planet, there's a being that has that kind of power and is choosing to allow this racism, this sexism, this homophobia, this oppression, this greed and hatred and delusion. So that idea just feels like, oh, humans made that shit up. Because if there was really a being that could do that, had that power, it definitely would. If there was a compassionate being, it wouldn't let the world be like this. So I sort of, at some point, completely dismissed the possibility that there's an omnipotent being, kind of that could do something, but's choosing not to. That doesn't, for me, and you may have different views, but for me, that makes zero sense. That there's a being that could, but is choosing not to. But Buddhism was the tradition, in the spiritual, it's religion, that kind of painted a picture of here's the way things are. It's cause and effect. It's conditioned. It's karma. Everything that's happening here is based on the conditions that preceded it, and there is no power that could alleviate suffering, but that every human being has the power and the potential and the ability to alleviate suffering for themselves from the inside out. that we can't, that it's Buddhism in some simple ways is a humanist psychology, saying the human being can develop compassion, can develop forgiveness, can develop wisdom, can practice non-attachment, and can end suffering through our own efforts. And so that felt more practical, more rational, more realistic, more empowering, rather than some sort of divine intervention, a personal humanist intervention that we have to work for, that we have to, very radical, revolutionary idea that humans have power and ability to train the mind, to see clearly, and to become compassionate, and to become wise, and to become loving. And this question that I started with was a long road to this, the world that we live in, and some reflections on how a Buddhist view of the world is helpful to me. Maybe it would be is helpful to you. Maybe it's helpful to reflect on some of the ways that the Buddha talked about the lack of justice, lack of wisdom, lack of equality on this planet. It's not lost on me that a lot of the Buddhist teachings, like this is probably true for a lot of people, but it was definitely true for me, matched up with what I already believed in some ways. Now, because I already believe that there was a world of injustice and confusion and ignorance and greed and hatred. I already believed that before I started practicing Buddhism. What I didn't believe, and where Buddhism has been and continues to be hugely transformational and hopeful, is that there's actually something we can do about it. That there is actually a personal awakening, and the mindfulness teachings, which are the core meditation technique for awakening, to see clearly, to be awake, to see the impermanent nature of things, to learn non-attachment, to learn to understand the impersonal nature of the human form, subject to sickness and aging and death. And to begin to access positive emotion, the loving kindness, like we did for the second half. For ourselves, learning to love ourselves, to forgive ourselves, to love each other, to even this in the instruction that to even love our enemies, to have loving kindness. I love that. I just look over there and somebody's like, we're not loving our enemies. The potential, the possibility of having loving kindness for all living beings. And Keiko's shaking her head. And I felt that way in the beginning too. My first couple of years of Buddhist practice, I was like, I don't know about that. Maybe I can learn some forgiveness. Maybe I can learn some compassion, but I don't know if I'll ever have compassion and forgiveness and loving kindness for my enemies. And natural for the mind to go to Trump, or in my day it was Reagan and Bush and the previous fascists. Now we have the current fascists, and pretty easy for the mind to dismiss the possibility of having compassion and loving kindness for beings that we see as so confused, to the point we see them as so confused, we see them as evil. and because they're causing a lot of harm, as often political people with power do, cause a lot of harm. Some worse than others, for sure. When the Buddha taught the first he came, he had all of his years of practice and exploration, and he came to liberation without a teacher. He kind of figured it out. He figured out mindfulness. He opened the heart to compassion and to forgiveness and to loving kindness through his own trial and error. He had no instructions. He didn't have any Buddhism to study. And he actually said, most of what I studied sort of misled me into these concentration meditations that gave me a temporary bliss, but didn't actually develop wisdom. And when he first started to teach, the first teaching, most of you are aware of the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the preview, whatever the word is. Prelude, I don't know. Quaalude? Prelude. The first thing that he said is that I've discovered a path, a middle path. And this middle path, which is the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, this middle path leads between two dead ends. He said, in this world, we're all looking for happiness, for well-being, for meaning, we're looking, we're seeking, we want to figure it out. He said, but there's two dead ends that need to be avoided in order to figure it out, in order to actually have happiness and actually experience liberation and well-being. He said, and one dead end is becoming too extreme with religion. Blind faith, just believing it's true because it's in the Bible or because it's in the Quran or because it's in the Upanishads or the Bhagavad Gita, or even because it's in the Buddhist suttas. It's a dead end to have blind faith in scripture or any kind of religious asceticism, or just kind of taking it too far, not approaching spiritual teachings with a curiosity and kind of that sort of, I just believe it because it's in the book. It's a dead end. That will not get anybody free ever, that sort of blind faith. And the other dead end, more germane to tonight's topic about the world, is he said, looking for happiness, looking for well-being, looking for liberation in the world, hoping that the world will provide a refuge for you, is a dead end. Worldliness. And partially he's talking about sense pleasures, thinking that if I get enough pleasant feelings, I'll be happy. If I have enough delicious food and drink and sensation and experience, enough dopamine, if I can just feel good all of the time, if the world could just provide pleasure all of the time, then I'd be happy. He said, but it's a dead end because obviously most of us got ourselves strung out trying to do that. Drank ourselves into alcoholism, trying to find a refuge in sense pleasure, trying to avoid pain. He said also the world, not only of sense pleasure, but also, connected with sense pleasure, worldliness of material things. If I can just get enough money, if I can just get enough stuff, if I can just get one more motorcycle. How many motorcycles is enough? One more. It's just it's never enough. There's not enough stuff in the world to work for anybody ever. Including the billionaires. Obviously. Look at them. They're a fucking mess. I mean, I don't know any, but they seem, from what I've seen on Instagram. I think it's pretty normal, natural, common to have some ideas about I would be happy if I had more stuff, more success, more pleasure. There does seem to be some way our survival instinct is wired towards pleasure, away from pain, material stuff, the promise of more pleasantness, more comfort, more security, all of that. So pretty, no judgment of it. And, the Buddha said this middle path, but his middle path was one of monasticism and renunciation that to us probably seems a little extreme. He said, there's because he was so convinced that the world could not provide happiness. In some ways, the monastics take a vow to disengage from the world, to stop holding the world accountable for their happiness, and say, we're just not going to engage in any materialism because materialism doesn't work. We're not going to engage in any intentional sense pleasures or very little intentional sense pleasures. They take vows of celibacy and saying, obviously, sexuality, very pleasant, human, natural, beautiful, but also it doesn't provide happiness, not true happiness. And actually, if we were all really honest and transparent with each other, we would probably all admit that we've suffered a bit more around sexuality than we've had happiness around it. It's always some suffering in relationships. I don't think anybody's ever had an intimate relationship that had zero suffering, unless it was very anonymous. Maybe some of you've had some good anonymous sex where there was no suffering. But as soon as there's a connection, there's almost always suffering. On some level or another, not big suffering, but difficulty, unpleasantness. So a core part of the Buddha's view is that the world, and I feel like this is really useful as a reminder for myself, for all of us, that the world will not provide happiness. It's not actually the world's job to provide happiness. And the idea that we have that somehow we're going to have happiness if the world would just be different than it is, then we'd be happy. If it would just, if we could kind of get what we wanted more. And it's a pervasive thought and feeling on this planet that there's got to be a material, sensual, or political solution. That if just, if we could just have a form of communism, where everybody just had the same amount of stuff. Capitalism, that's the problem. But obviously, the examples of communism that we've seen in China and Russia didn't work that well. But it's a pretty good idea. Oh, let's have equality. Everybody, we'll just share everything. Like the hippies did in the 60s and 70s. They went up and started communes. It's a good idea. Except for all of the children that came out of those communes. Like, what the fuck? That was not a good idea. My sense is that Buddhism offers us a realistic view of the world. The world's like this. It's a world of greed, hatred, delusion. The Buddha referred to the world as samsara, realm of perpetual wandering, fueled by craving for pleasure and aversion to pain, and wandering through relationship after relationship, and perhaps lifetime after lifetime, trying to get something that the world can't provide, until we realize it's an inside job, and that the happiness that we're looking for, the freedom that we're looking for, the well-being that we're looking for, has to be unlocked from within. That there is not an external refuge. There is no, this was the Buddha's dying words. After 40-something years of teaching the Four Truths and the Eightfold Path and all of the meditation instructions and beautiful Dharma lectures that he gave over and over on his deathbed, which it feels important, like this is what you need to remember. Do not seek an external refuge. Be diligent about your practice, your meditation, your renunciation, and take full responsibility for your own happiness in some way or another, was his final teaching. Stop looking to the world. And part of the context of that teaching was that his students had become so attached to him, and he was dying, and he saw, hey, I've been trying to teach you guys non-attachment. It's okay to grieve, it's okay. But you could see that they still were taking refuge in the teacher rather than the teaching. Still looking to that human tendency to be devotional towards a person rather than wisdom. He said, I'm teaching you, it's not me, it's wisdom. Stop taking external refuges, whether it's in materialism or even in spiritual teachers and people. Take refuge in the teachings. Take refuge in the wisdom. Take refuge in your ability to be awake, to practice non-attachment, to practice compassion, to be forgiving, to be loving towards all living beings, not just the easy ones, not just the people you like. Although even the people we like are annoying, right? I see the Buddha as a really radical spiritual revolutionary. And I think that even though his view was that there wasn't a lot of hope for justice on this planet, the example that he lived was one of being anti-racist, anti-sexist, anti-oppression, of creating a subculture community based on merit, based on how you showed up in the community and the service that you did, and a community of radical non-materialism, of living free from charging for the teachings or charging people to be Buddhist, but making a full donation-based culture where they lived on the donations that they received. They gave their life's energy to their practice and also to service. And so I sort of land in this view that, not that we can split it into chunks, but maybe, just for the sake of this perspective, half of the practice is, like even in the meditation instructions tonight, I gave you half mindfulness, which is developing our own wisdom, and then half loving kindness, which is extending kindness to the world. Half of the practice is renunciation, meditation. The other half is compassionate, engaged service, speaking out against injustice, being radically honest, and working to create a positive change on the planet. And Siddhartha, the Buddha, did this for over 40 years and left this example of his enlightenment wasn't like, now I'm just going to sit around and be enlightened. He was on the front lines in political action. There's several different times in the teachings where there's wars happening, there's murder happening, there's his own family's getting wiped out towards the end of his life in a violent conflict. And he's going and he's trying to speak to the leaders. Now, he was in a privileged position where they would actually listen to him. You guys don't, none of us can go be like, hey, let's have a sit down with Trump. Try to talk some sense into this guy. The Buddha was actually in a position where he could go and talk to the king and give him a little lecture about karma and a little reminder about the suffering that he was creating. And sometimes those interventions that the Buddha did worked and the kings changed their mind. Most of the time, they listened to him and they dismissed him and they went off on their murdering and stealing and thieving and greed. Even with the fully enlightened Buddha, he wasn't able to talk ignorant people out of being ignorant all that often. And so he had that acceptance of everyone has their own karma. Everyone's happiness or unhappiness depends on their actions, not my wishes for them, these equanimity understandings. But he still tried, I think is the point. Even though, that willingness to try, that willingness to engage, that not allowing the overwhelm of the situation become complacency and become hopelessness. Knowing that we can create some positive changes from the inside out. I've seen this really clearly in my life, coming to the Dharma as a teenage drug addict that was not being helpful to anyone ever. I was much more likely to steal from you and to maybe physically harm you and all of the other behavior, really negative, harmful part of the problem lifestyle that I was in. And then as I started meditating and established and maintained abstinence and recovery and started being of service and helping other alcoholics and drug addicts, and eventually, after about a decade or so of my own meditation practice, teaching, being able to share the instructions, being able to create organizations, Against the Stream, Refuge Recovery, and all of that coming out of my practice. Coming out of how can I create a positive change on this planet? Everything that I've done. How can I be part of the solution? Now, it hasn't changed the world. I mean, look at, here we are. But I've been able to help a lot of individuals, and those individuals have gone on to help a lot of individuals, and those individuals have gone on. This meditation class Monday nights, every Monday for the last 20 years here on the West Side. Thousands of people have come through here. They're not all here anymore, but thousands of people have come and been able to then maybe pass that on to other people and live it and have a little bit of freedom in their life and go off in their other direct. For years, I was training teachers. I had all of these teachers that were going out and teaching it and spreading it and to the jails and the juvenile halls and the treatment centers. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but just trying to kind of the potential of we can actually do something. It is possible. Maybe I'm not the best example because of, I have a rare, not everybody's going to write books and become a Dharma teacher and all that stuff that I've done. But in your own way, each of us can do something to help the world. You don't need to be a social worker. You don't need to be a therapist. You don't need to be a Dharma teacher. In whatever activities you're already in, becoming more kind, becoming more loving, and being willing, to, some of it in this system, it's an interesting dilemma. I don't know how many of you vote. Those of you who don't, I bet you wish you did. But I think it's, whatever that statistic is, so few, so many people don't vote, feel so overwhelmed, so powerless, so, that aren't actually engaged because the political system is not very hopeful. I had several conversations before this last election of voting for the lesser of two evils still feels like voting for evil. And, people who are like, I just can't bring myself because the Democrats are really fucked too. I can't bring myself to voting for either of them. And then, I have a friend who is like, well, I just vote independent. And then that question of like, well, that's the vote for the other side? You take one away from the Democrats, you're giving it to the Republicans. And they're like, yeah, but my conscience says I can't vote for either of these bipartisan fascists on both sides. What a dilemma. I don't have a lot of political solutions, but I have a lot of questions, and I have a lot of encouragement for all of us to not just use Buddhism as personal self-help wisdom path, but to remember that a large part of it is service, is generosity, is engagement, is how can we help each other in small ways, in the Sangha, really developing community to support, to be there for each other when we are feeling overwhelmed with how fucked the world is. When I was thinking about this talk, I actually wanted to start it. I'll end it how I wanted to start it. I wanted to start it by just saying, fuck the world. And that fuck the world is a core Buddhist teaching. But the word fuck depends on your tone. Because fuck the world is a little bit more like when you say, fuck that. Not fuck you. You know what I mean? Fuck that. I'm not doing that. Fuck looking for happiness in the material and sensual world. I'm gonna wake up. I'm gonna do an internal process of awakening. But not fuck the world in the kind of let's be complacent and not do anything to create a positive change. Just fuck looking for happiness in the world as the source of your happiness. Know that it's a inside spiritual awakening process that we're in. And that no matter how much pleasure and money and stuff and success, and it just doesn't work. It's just a dead end. That having been said, go for it. Enjoy the world. I do. I quite enjoy the world. I quite enjoy existence. And I didn't before Dharma practice, but Dharma practice has led to the ability to have some level of equanimity, some level of ease, some level of compassion and forgiveness, to the point where, I'm not suffering so much. And maybe some of this is my own white privilege, and that's not lost on me, but at the beginning I asked you, how you're feeling about the world, and I briefly shared, I feel a bit more anxious than usual, is the truth for me. I've always thought this place is fucked, but with all of the past oppressors in the White House and politics in this country, it has never been so. It was always more under the radar. So it's never been so blatant in my lifetime as these guys, who was like, wow, they're really over. It was more covert, like it's so overtly. Overt ignorance is running the show, right out on display. from my perspective. I don't know. At one point, I had a student lots of years ago. I was going off about something, guns or I don't know, something non-violent. And he said, he was this old hippie in San Francisco. I was really surprised. He said, I'm a Republican and I'm the president of he said, I love your teachings. He said, but your political stuff, I don't like so much. He said, I love the Buddhist stuff. He's like, but when you start getting political, he said, I'm a Republican and I'm the president of the San Francisco NRA. This is an old hippie guy. I was shocked. But it also reminded me that also the Dharma's available for everyone. And, if you're a Republican, you're welcome here. If you think Trump's doing a good job, you're still welcome here. It's okay to be wrong. Still be welcomed into a community, no matter how confused you are. And also I'm open to maybe I'm confused. I could be wrong. I share my views and opinions. I'm not an enlightened being. I'm not right about everything for sure. But I certainly have a liberal political views. I'm pro-woke, pro-politically correct. All of that stuff that has become derogatory criticism. How dare you be compassionate? We got to get rid of all these compassionate people. They're the problem. All right, that was my soapbox about the world for tonight. A couple minutes, if there's a question or two, we could have a question or two. What do you think? Sure, Ramesh, go ahead.
I was just wondering, I was thinking about recently, do you think you can be aware of your thoughts without changing them? Or maybe is that the point? Or can you?
Changing them how?
Just changing the quality of them, changing the direction of them, changing what they are, contents of them. Can you just be aware? You just added that dimension to it.
Yeah.
Now there's an awareness of it, but it's the same.
So the question, if you couldn't hear it at home or in the back, is do I think we can be aware of our thoughts? Observing, this is the third foundation of mindfulness, aware of the mental formations, thoughts, without changing them? Or does the awareness itself, the observer sort of consciousness awareness, change them in some way? I think that technically the answer, the right Buddha, first of all, I don't know. I'm not totally, I don't want to take a strong stance on whether we can do that or not. But I think that the teaching points to yes. The teaching points to, yes, you can. Mindful awareness is non-interfering. Awareness just is. And awareness is just aware of what is arising and passing through. And where awareness does not interfere, it does not change it. It just knows. Thoughts are arising and passing, and that's a plan, and that's a memory, and that's hope, and that's fear. And it doesn't change it, it just knows it. It's non-interfering. So I think that technically the answer is yes, but I don't want to take too strong of a stance because, I don't know, maybe there is something about the awareness that does change it a little bit. I don't know. But I believe that the teachings are pointing towards that the answer is yes, you can just observe. Awareness can just know what's happening without changing it at all.
So if you're aware of your thoughts and you notice that keeps changing them, or whatever, maybe it's just like, normally you sit there and dwell on some negative shit and you're like, oh, whenever I notice I'm dwelling on negative shit, I stop. And maybe you're not really being mindful, you're just changing the track, you're just intervening.
Maybe. I'm not sure.
No, I was just thinking about it.
Okay, I won't leave it there for tonight. I talked a lot about service and generosity and the radical Buddhist culture that's created by stepping outside of the capitalist fee-for-service model. And it's what we've been trying to do here at Against, what I've been trying to do here at Against the Stream for decades now, is to create a community that's based in service and voluntary contribution, and not monetizing Buddhism, but actually just making it available. And it's my practice to make it available to you. And the only way that we have a center and I'm supported as a teacher and we pay our employees, Sebastian, and we keep the lights on and the website and the classes going is through your practice of generosity, your voluntary contribution, and that place of practicing what we call dana, giving, generosity, sharing of some of your energy, your resources, your funds. So the suggested donation, I don't even like suggested donations. Maybe actually suggested donations are a little anti-Buddhist, even putting a price on it. Because the thought is that it's priceless. You can't put a price on meditation instruction. You can't put a price on Dharma talks. It's freely offered. But what I've found over the last 3 decades of teaching is that if I don't do a suggestion, the average donation is like $2 or $3 a person, which won't pay the rent. So please consider being very generous, and if you're able to. And the suggested donation is more like $25, and so I say 25 because then the average donation will be like 7 instead of 3. So really try to give $25 when you can and when you're here to actually help support this thing continuing. But if you can't afford $25, give what feels appropriate to you. Give what, and if you can afford more, give hundreds. Give generously. Really kind of let this be a place that you support, rather than a place where you're coming to get. Also a place where you're coming to give. Hopefully. You get to find your way with that. 2 announcements. The Joshua Tree retreat looks like it's pretty full. If you're planning to come, register right away. We might have to shut down registration soon. So if you were planning to come and you haven't registered yet, register. It's May 13th through 18th. And we'll try to expand the number to be able to accommodate more people that want to come. But we've already kind of gone over the number of beds that we reserved. So now it's a big place, so we'll be able to find some more beds at the place, hopefully. If not, I don't know. I think George is going to sleep in his van. We'll see. It used to be at this place that we could camp. And so we'd have however many beds we had, and then people could camp, and it kind of let us have as many people as wanted to come because you just sleep in tents out there. They no longer allow camping there, so it's all has to be in the rooms and the cabins so you actually have to have a bed to go on this retreat. And then the Sri Lanka trip, November 10th through 24th. I'm going to take, 25 or 30 people who want to come with me to a 2-week Buddhist pilgrimage. We'll have some retreat time. We're going to have some beach time. We're going to have some jungle time. We're going to have one night at an elephant sanctuary where the elephants come up and, snarfle you or whatever elephants do. And it's going to be the last couple of days of this pilgrimage. There's a sapling from the original Bodhi tree that the Buddha was enlightened under that was brought to Sri Lanka thousands of years ago. And the ancestor of this original Bodhi tree is still there at this temple in Sri Lanka. The last couple of days you're going to be at that Bodhi tree. And so Sri Lanka is the oldest Buddhist culture on the planet because even though Buddhism was from India, Buddhism died in India and kind of is trying to regrow in India, but really it's been alive for thousands of years in an unbroken Theravadan lineage in Sri Lanka. So it's a special place to visit. And I hope a lot of you come with me. That's open for registration. May any goodness that comes from our practice and discussion of the Buddha's Dharma be shared with all beings. May each one of us get as free as possible in this lifetime. And together may we create a positive change on this planet. See you next week, or not. Either way.